If I asked you to close your eyes right now and think about your weaknesses, can you name them? Do you know what they are? Did it take you to point them out, or was it because somebody else pointed them out for you? Hey everyone, Dr. Jones, and this week on Seeing to Lead, we talked to Samantha Ruth. Now, Samantha Ruth is a psychologist focused on breaking through the stigmas and stereotypes of anxiety and grief. And one of the ways she first addresses this issue is by talking about weaknesses and how we can take our weaknesses and turn them into superpowers by taking control and defining them on our own terms rather than those assigned to us. You see, all too often, people tell us what our weaknesses are. They create them, they reinforce them, and we just accept what's given and said rather than flipping the coin and looking at how there are strengths instead of weaknesses. You see, because all of us have different things that make us unique and that make us uniquely valuable. So that's where schools come in. You see, schools need to focus on teaching students how to verbalize what their superpowers are and live in them. But they also have to tell them and teach them and support them in verbalizing when they're not okay, and then support them accordingly, because that's where superpowers begin and take off. You see, it's very hard to understand things that are invisible like anxiety and depression. I mean, somebody that suffers from either one of those or struggles with either one of those isn't walking around with a cast on their arm or on their leg. So what we have to do is work to support those people that carry them with them as much as we would support somebody with a cast on their arm or their leg. You know, something Samantha said to me during this interview that really hit home as she explained that we need to make speaking more openly about grief and anxiety more the norm than the exception. Because this is not easy. This is difficult in our environments and in our communities. But it's difficult because we're not comfortable with it. And when that conversation came up, Samantha reminded me, riding a bike is uncomfortable until it's not. These conversations we need to have are uncomfortable until they're not. But think about when you're riding that bike. Once you're comfortable, boy, do you fly. Wouldn't it be great if we could do the same in supporting people going through times of grief and anxiety? You are going to learn so much from Samantha during this episode. It's so useful, this discussion we have concerning these areas of mental health. Do me a favor. Do Samantha a favor. Do everyone a favor by subscribing to the show, rating, and reviewing it. It helps more than you can imagine, because then everybody can benefit just like you. But don't just listen to me talking about how you're going to benefit. Let's listen to Samantha Ruth talking about grief, anxiety, and how to support those around us on Seeing to Lead.
Do it your way, honestly. There's so many other things that also matter, but please let's rock the boat.
Dr. Chris Jones here, and welcome to Seeing to Lead, a show designed to help leaders increase their ability to effectively support, engage, and empower their staff through intentional practices so that they create an environment where everyone reaches their greatest level of success. On Seeing to Lead, communication rules the day as we hear voices from both teachers and leaders in an effort to examine perspectives, highlight misunderstandings, and provide steps to ultimately bridge the gap between what teachers need and provide through thoughtful dialogue. This show is about amplifying voices, creating understanding, and providing information to help everyone continually improve. I want to personally thank you for taking the time. Now, let's get to getting better. Samantha is a psychologist, speaker, best-selling author, and host of the To Be Ruthless show, a podcast dedicated to making noise and breaking stigmas. She helps people around the world turn their pain into their power by guiding them to be their true selves, not who they think they need to be, by embracing their differences and recognizing that their perceived weaknesses are actually their biggest strengths, and by living life on their own terms. Samantha's mission is to change the way the world views both grief and mental health, so people can speak about whatever issues they have and get the help they not only need but deserve without fear of judgment, labels, and repercussions. Samantha is the proud founder of Griefhab, a 24/7 community open to anyone who has experienced a loss. After personally living through this, Sam realized just how much support she needed on a daily basis. She vowed to create these services so that others would have more support available in their times of need. In her free time, you can find Sam and her pups, Sassy and Dallas, on one of their outdoor adventures. They love living in Colorado and never miss an opportunity to explore their beautiful surroundings. Music fuels Sam's soul. Family means everything to her, and honoring her late husband, Jim, and making him proud gives her life daily purpose. Personally, I've been waiting to have this conversation with Sam for two reasons. First, is her stance on embracing differences and recognizing one's weaknesses as strengths, something very personal to me. Second, is her openness concerning dealing with grief, to the point that she has founded a way for people to get the help they need. Another thing personal to me, the idea of not just talking about, but doing. So much of what we do is, in the end, about mental health. And Samantha is here to help us improve how we do that. Sam, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
I guess we'll just jump right in with some of the important things that I'm talking about, or that I said I liked when I went through your bio. Let's talk a little bit about turning your weaknesses, identifying your weaknesses and turning them into strengths, and how you came to that perspective to do things like that.
Hit a topic. So for me personally, I've lived with anxiety my whole life. That's, in this world, viewed as a negative thing. I'm a psychologist, so I work with people with any and every type of mental illness, negative. I did not know until I lost my husband that grief is also something that people look at you like you have horns with. Being short, being tall, having a birthmark, being overweight, underweight, you pick it, being on medication, anything that the world or you or your family or the media labels, really, truly, we can turn that around and it can be our superpower. So the minute I decided that anxiety was not going to control me, it really is my weapon.
So, it's interesting that you talk about that. And I, as you started talking about it and then you said it, I really heard it. Mental illness, where it's got that negative connotation to it, and terms matter so much. Now, you talk about having anxiety and turning that into your superpower. How does that happen beyond the idea of, I would assume, you'd have to ignore all the negative stigmas that are labeled with it?
Anxiety is truly it is a physical experience that comes with emotional things, right? But the physical experience is our body telling us something. That is a gift. That is my body letting me know. That's intuition. That's, if I learn how to use it, that has become my map, my way to navigate this world, my way to learn how to listen to me and not the noise that is everywhere. So, we can use my loss and the way I handled grief, and then a dear friend who lost her husband a year later. The world expected a psychologist who's an expert, who's worked with loss and grief, suicide, overdose. That was what I did before I went through it personally. And my clients wouldn't say I did a horrible job. So I was expected to bounce back, get back to work, know what to do. So the world expected me to handle it differently than I did. I was taking too long. I was not being fun Sam. I was not doing it the way they wanted Sam to do it. My friend a year later was getting back to life too quickly. She wasn't taking time to mourn. She wasn't, handling it the way they wanted her to. No matter what we do, there's going to be noise.
Right. So it becomes, if I'm hearing you right, it becomes ignoring the noise and doing what works best for you so that you can own your own mental health.
And learning whatever it is, if your weakness, maybe you do not have something that has a physical, cue, but you do have intuition. You can learn to live a different way with a different mindset. So even something like Ruthless, my podcast, to be Ruth, that's a negative word. I even choose to use that word in a different way and take things that the world views negatively and make them positive, because who says ruthless means attack who says it has to be that way?
Right. So it makes me wonder the idea that you were capable of doing that and you noticed that in a colleague that went through the same loss. And that's fantastic to be able to do that. But with schools experiencing as much anxiety or cases of anxiety that they currently are, cases of depression that they currently are, and cases of successful suicides, how can we teach students or help students or support students in finding out what works for them so they can turn these feelings, these responses, into a positive for themselves?
We are allowed to raise our hand and say, I have to go to the bathroom. I have a tummy ache, right? My nieces, I wanted them to know what an emotional tummy ache was at an early age because we are not taught that it is okay to say something isn't okay. And the kids don't know how to put it into words. I've had anxiety my whole life. I didn't know how to say that when I was in elementary school. The most amazing thing is that my 11-year-old niece has therapy dogs in her school. So depending on where you are, you can raise your hand and say, can I see the dog? Can I go to the playroom? Some schools have meditation, depending on where you are. Unfortunately, where I am, we're not there yet. But we can learn how to teach our kids to raise their hands and say, can I call my mom? Can I go to whoever is their favorite person in that building?
And we make use of comfort dogs in my building. So we're there and we have, and actually it's an interesting pairing because we have our school resource officer. Typically people look at police officers as a negative, and he has a comfort dog. And so he has his office. The students walk by his office and they stop in and they pet the dog. And he walks around the hallways with the dog. And the dog is fantastic. But we don't really have a large showing of comfort dogs unless there's an issue. Is that something we should look at changing? Is that something we should put in place to maybe have more comfort dogs more often? I know there's other companies out there that do almost whole petting zoos. They'll bring in any animal.
The comfort dog is in my niece's school all day, every day. There are some students who have scheduled time. So, if she raises her hand or someone raises their hand on Tuesday at whatever, it might not be available, but it could be in 30 minutes. So certain things are reserved, but it is always there. So yes, I would love to live in that world.
That'd be nice, right?
I worked with the school police officers in Michigan and love that people could learn. It doesn't have to be someone you're afraid of. I have clients in certain states who will not walk in. They will not walk into a room, dog or no dog. They do not see the police officers as friendly liaisons. And I'm told this enough times in certain states that I believe it and don't know what to do to help change that because they will not walk in the room. We're supposed to be able to go in to the office where the nurses are. They will not. They will go to the bathroom and call me or their mom.
So when you're talking about calling you for obviously professional reasons, but calling their mom for personal reasons, when we're working with the idea of having students turn their weaknesses into strengths, how do we get the parents on board with that? Because often we're running into parents who are very resistant to any action or steps towards resilience or working through strategies to get to a place where they can do that. Because that's a long trip for people. Some people it's longer than others based on who the individual is. But more often than not, we find the parents putting up roadblocks saying that, no, if they're uncomfortable, that's it, and we're done. What are your thoughts around that and how we could possibly help with that? Or do we just give in to the parents?
The parents get the final say. If they're open to conversations, there really, truly are physical things these children are going through. So, if it's a broken leg, would we let them have crutches? If it's a broken arm, would we let them, if there is support available, can we allow it. It doesn't have to be something they're afraid of. They get a vote. They can agree or disagree to all of the things, what you would be surprised at the outcomes. And we can give them statistics and show them results and give them measurable things to see if they would want those numbers to, it is scary. I have people with anxiety say to me, I didn't believe in it until I experienced it. So, it's hard to understand invisible things. It really is. So, even just being willing to say, what type of support would be acceptable? How can we do it your way? It doesn't have to be a fight, but your child is suffering, I promise you. And is there any way we could at least just open the conversation about a compromise?
Right. And I'm just wondering, I always wonder if there's a way to educate parents around this. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I don't mean like, from up on high, we have to tell parents how it is. I don't mean anything like that. I mean, just oftentimes our perspective of our own children is different than reality. And sometimes the reality could be a little scary for parents. And I'm just wondering how we would go about that. Do we do that? Or in your opinion, do we do that through some sessions with our school psychologists? Do we do that through our counseling department? What do you think would be best to reach parents that way?
Funding. Their schools have funding to bring in whoever you want to have workshops. I'm going to bring up an example, and it might seem extreme, but this is the world we live in. Have you had a bomb threat, a false shooting, a shooting in any of your areas? Have any of these parents lived? Because I'm in Colorado, the home of Columbine. We have had in multiple high schools and the universities, false and real. So the anxiety, even in a false threat, these kids are now we went through tornado drills when I grew up. Okay. These kids are living through, I forgot the trainings they are going through. They have to live through these preps. And during these drills, and when real or not, your child's phone is disconnected by the world, by the school, and yours is as well. You cannot reach your child. You don't know it's a false threat, and your child doesn't either. So nothing happens. There was no bomb and there was no shooter. But I now have how many cases of real anxiety and post-traumatic stress? If that has happened to anyone, can we use that as an example? We're having real life police in body armor with, like you see on TV, SWAT running in. These are the drills that your children are going through. If they haven't yet, they will in the next, whatever, by 5th grade. So if you don't know what anxiety is, think about that and not being able to call and know if they're safe. Is this a real drill? Oh my God, there's a shooter in my child's school and you're seeing this on the news and you cannot, their phone is dead. Can we then give them a pass to go to the office to call you or me if they need it?
I love the way you tied that up like that, where you said, well, given all of that, can't we just let them go? Because my next question to you was, so how can we as schools lessen that impact? Is there a way, or is there no way to lessen that impact?
I mean, would you be able to sleep the same? Would you be able to come to that classroom that you had to lay on the floor and care about math? I don't know. I have anxiety. So I'm telling you 100%, I would not care about math.
Right.
I might not be able to go to school. My attendance might decline. So parents, can we look at it that way? And so I'm not saying let's make massive changes. I'm saying I give kids a pass that they don't have to raise their hand. So they don't have to go through I don't want anybody to see me. You and me have an invisible signal. So they are allowed to stand up, leave the room, go to their counselor, and it is the counselor's job to let the teacher know right? So we don't have to go through worrying and dealing with, what am I going to miss? Am I going to get a 0?
No, that's more of a silence thing. And any little step that lowers that bar, we talk a lot about, and it's funny because you have a podcast as well. Not funny, haha, but just some of the different connections we can make where even in marketing for regular companies, they say lower that bar of entry for people so that it's a really easy step to purchase a product. It's a really easy step to click listen on a podcast. Why can't it be a really easy step to find support in a school? And if that means a silent signal, if that means not having to raise your hand, that seems to me to be pretty low-hanging fruit that most schools could accomplish, if not all schools could accomplish, with relative ease.
And parents don't know they're right. You don't even know what you are allowed to have until I advocate and get involved. So if you are struggling getting things, that's half the battle. So you're entitled so much support, and it's not supposed to be a fight.
Supporting your teachers and students seems to be a struggle. They just don't seem to be engaged. You wish they would take more responsibility for their learning and culture of the building, but they just don't seem to be empowered enough to do it. So, my question is, have you checked out the book Seeing to Lead yet? It's all about creating a true educational experience where learning, growth, leadership, and community take center stage. Full of strategies and resources, Seeing to Lead is about attaining that goal by employing a model that supports, engages, and empowers all individuals to become leaders themselves. Pick up a copy today at seeingtolead.com. That's seeingtolead.com. Remember, you don't become a leader and then decide you need to support and recognize others more than yourself. It is the moment you realize it's about supporting and recognizing others that you become a leader. Seeingtolead.com. Right. It's not supposed to be a fight, and it's just too bad that an advocate has to get involved or somebody has to advocate instead of just doing what feels right. Unfortunately, on the heels of that, people, I find, or many people's probably the wrong way to put it because that means just about everybody. Many of the people that view this negatively, I should say, they don't think it's right. They're missing it. And I mean, you mentioned it before with you don't recognize what's invisible. It's not a broken arm. It's not a broken leg. But how can schools, in your estimation, start to better educate the decision makers, the leaders, the teachers, the everybody in between to understand that this really does affect students in a very real way and adults so that we can make support easier access. We can get more support on a consistent basis. How can we start to turn that corner where there's a possibility of the lowest level of support needed available in every classroom? How do we go about doing that?
You guys have the budget for certain things. There are trainings and certain things required. Like, can we add mental wellness? Can it be a part of what you do? Where can it be added? I have a dear friend. I used to tease and joke about New York and New Jersey, and they have this stereotype of people and moving so fast. I am really impressed with the schools and what I've learned. She calls it taking out the trash. Before everybody comes in and they take out the trash. And it's the emotional trash. Everybody comes in, there's anything they got to let go of, they literally do it. They shake it off, but then they talk about it. And then I can't remember then they close they do a little quick, maybe a meditation and then when all of those things are taken care of, they get to academic. If there's 4 minutes left, somebody might cry.
Right.
Right? That's the school I would love to have gone to. That's the world I want to live in. I tell her every day, everyone needs a you.
Well, and I don't know why it's taking so long for people to realize that if a student isn't emotionally available to learn, I don't care how good you are in the classroom, what strategies you're using, what boxed curriculum you might put in front of them. they're not going to learn. Newsflash. But just shifting gears really quick for a little bit, I was hoping you'd talk to the listeners about Griefhab or Griefhab.
Yeah, so I was blown away at the lack of support available. I did not receive a pamphlet, nothing, not a human, from the emergency room to the funeral home. So Griefhab is rehab for grief because there's rehab for everything else. There really, really is. Donor Alliance is amazing, but not everybody's organ donors. And I didn't really get involved until I chose to with them. So it's not your traditional, it's any and everything that you need. It's everything I needed that I couldn't find because there is a lot that happens. It's not just the emotional stuff. Like I got tasks in the mail, close this account, present this death certificate.
Right.
That would knock me back however many steps I thought I had gotten forward. And that, I needed help with everything. The first time a light bulb burnt out, it was the end of the world. Just all of those little things that got in the way. So it is, and you also don't have to wait until your next appointment because the boo-hoos happen outside of business hours and, you need people when the office doors are closed.
So what's that look like? How does somebody access that?
So there is a Facebook 24/7 community where you have access to me as well as the other 700 plus people who have been through some sort of loss. And then there's all sorts of other branches. I also needed widows specifically. We all understand pain. I needed people who had my pain. So I do groups specific to loss by suicide, loss by overdose. We were talking about pet loss, different types of things. So people can connect with any type of loss, sit back silently and be a part of a community, or have smaller groups with each other. And then I also just have a community of all sorts of other people in the grief world. I have a friend who, lost his sibling and does sibling group. So, if you've lost a job, loss is loss. And they all matter, and this world doesn't discuss it. So it's a place where you can do that because it matters, and you can do it your way, and we won't judge you and give you the noise. Like my current noise is, why are you still wearing your wedding ring? When are you gonna date? You're so young. There's always noise.
Always noise. So it's interesting that you said there's loss going on all over, which there is, but the world doesn't discuss it. How can schools help in that fashion? I mean, schools are a community unto themselves. And somebody said to me one time on a different topic, but I think it may, in a broader sense, relate to this. We were talking about diversity and, the struggles that some schools go through with diverse populations. And this individual said to me that he said, well, Chris, think about it. He said, high school is the last place where teenagers are forced to be with other teenagers who they may not like, may not care to know, and may not want to hang out with. But they have to be there with them. And so I think to myself, with this loss, there are students who have anxiety. There are students who have depression. There are students who have suffered trauma, and they're forced to be there. How can schools become that hub that may be able to help them out? I mean, we do referrals out. We utilize a network called Care Solace that sets people up with referrals to kind of cut through the red tape and do that background work for them instead of making all those phone calls and everything. How can schools better serve their communities in that way, you think?
Well, let me tell you, I worked, shout out to the Livonia schools in Livonia, Michigan, Wayne County, Michigan. A male worker and I saw a need, and we thought we would start a group in the schools if parents consented and would allow their kids to be in a group. We started with one group, substance abuse. So many people signed up that we needed to do 2. By the end of the first semester, we had 4. By the end of, I ended up having so many, there was such a need that I ended up working with the entire Livonia school district. They got grants. They got funding for me to not just do that. Then I did alternative to suspension programs. Kids sitting at home all day outside of school wasn't helpful. They got funding to have me come into school and work with them during the day in a different way. So we can be creative. We can have the conversation. I'm in a state, the government dictates. I get no vote. Cared and asked psychologists, and the courts asked. And that is what happened. Boston is doing amazing work. Like, if you are in a place that cares and has the funding, these are the asks. Let's work together. I didn't want the funding. I didn't care about getting paid. But the school wanted funding to do more, so they got grant. There's a way. That's how. Bring in the people who are experts. Don't just think you have to do it and stress about the uncomfortable conversations. They are, until they're not. Riding a bike is uncomfortable until it's not.
It's a perfect analogy. So as we get to the end of this, I have 2 questions for you. The first one might be a little difficult because this is so part of who you are.
I know.
The Griefhab piece and the turning your weaknesses into strengths. But if you weren't all part of this, if you hadn't set up Griefhab, or if you weren't doing your therapy sessions, what would you be?
Really? I mean, I would be doing something with kids. I would be doing this in some way, in some other way. It's who I am. Like, it's my DNA. I knew at a very young age. That
must be very fulfilling, to be wrapped up in something that is just part of who you are. And I think that's a good thing. So I'm very happy that that's where you're at with all of this, that the idea it's part of who you are, which then on top of that tells me you're very good at it because you're very passionate about it and you're very bought into it and into the success of it.
Like during the days where you're like, you want to rip your hair out, you don't have any, but like I say, like, I'll just go sell veggie burritos on the beach. Like I could be I'm a hippie. Like I could, but that can only last for like a vacation.
Right. Yeah, it's good for a vacation, but it's not something you want to do. It's falling in love with the idea of something and not the actual practicality of it.
So I would end up doing that, and somehow then I would find all the kids there, right? And It would just right?
Right. You would just pick up and move shop is what you end up to.
Yep.
Yeah, over veggie burritos.
Right.
And I was going to have a quip about my hair and say that I shave it on purpose. I do, but I don't think I'd have much luck if I listen to it. Bro. The final thing I want to ask you is, you deal so much in these topics. What's the most important piece of advice you would give to leaders as they work to better support, engage, and empower those they serve?
Do it your way, honestly. There's so many other things that also matter, but please, let's rock the boat.
I can't think of a better way to leave it. If people want to get in touch with you and they want to learn more about you, I know you have a website and so forth that I'll put in the show notes, but what's the easiest way for them to get in touch with you?
SamanthaRuth.com has everything, one place.
Sounds good. I'll put that in the show notes. I hope people reach out to you because you have a lot of good ideas. And like I said before, you're clearly good at it and you're passionate about it. So I hope people reach out and take advantage of some of the ideas and services that you could offer.
Thank you so much for having this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Well, that's a wrap, but not the end. Next step, be sure to take action on something you heard here today. Hey, thanks for listening to the Seen to Lead podcast. If you would like to connect for any reason, email me at drchrissj@gmail.com or catch me on Twitter at Dr. C.S. Jones. If you've gotten any value from the Seen to Lead podcast today, you can help me and other leaders create a world-class environment through a teacher-centric approach by subscribing to the show, leaving an honest rating and review, and sharing this episode on social media with your most valuable takeaway. Also, one last thing. Have you had a chance to pick up my latest 5-star rated book yet? Grab your copy of Seeing to Lead anywhere you buy books or at seeingtolead.com. That's SEEINGTOLEAD.com, where you can learn more and continue to improve. Now go have a successful week.